Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode. I always say I'm excited to bring on my guest, but this week I'm extra excited because I'm sitting here with my friends for many, many years, and she is a mentor for me. She is I don't even know, very, very close person. Her name is Janis Bush. We met years ago when I was pregnant with my first baby, and she has helped me so much through two pregnancies. And I don't want to spend more time. I just want her to share her story, so much wisdom, so much knowledge. So welcome, Janis. I'm so happy to have you.
Well, thank you, Anya. It's great to be here. You know, your introduction, yes, we go back years and years and years, and actually the way you came into my life pretty much launched you into being very active about the whole normal birthing experience and women's health and our rights and everything too. So, and I'm very happy because I have to mentor the younger generations because I'm not going to be here forever. So the way that I got into this really, really, and shows you that childbirth work is my destiny, is when I was 4.5 years old. My mother brought a baby home, and I said, "Where did you get the baby?" And she said, "I found her under a rock, so we're going to call her Judy Bug," which we did. We called her Judy Bug. She still goes out. She's probably 69, 70 years old now. But I wasn't a stupid 4.5-year-old. And she told me she found the baby under a rock. And I said, because I was observant, "Was your stomach the rock?" Well, my mother just about had a flying fit. Of course, my stomach wasn't the rock, but I watched my mother have a big fluffy stomach, and now she didn't. And I knew on that day that my mother had lied to me about what it meant to be a woman. Now, I had yet to be old enough to notice the women's revolution, the sexual revolution. But I'm 4.5 years old, and my mother has lied to me about what it means to be a woman. And that started my quest to find out what that meant. So when I was in second grade, pregnant cat showed up on our doorstep. "Can we keep her? Can we keep her? Can we keep her?" And we did keep her. And unlike most domestic and wild animals, she let us watch her give birth, which I think was a divine experience because it was the next stepping stone to me finding out what it meant to be a woman, because by this time I may not have had the whole mammal thing figured out, but she had gone through the little slats of the side yard and made a nest in the sour grass, and then there was the neighbor's garage. So my mother said, "Don't talk to her and don't touch her," and which I still give that advice to people about women in labor, because when a mammal is laboring, there's a hormone called oxytocin that makes your uterus contract. And if you talk at or to or around a laboring mammal, labor stops because the brain says, "Okay, if you're doing something else, I'm not going to be in labor now." And then when you get quiet and peaceful in a cathedral-like atmosphere again. And I watched this little cat. She wasn't even a year old. Her name was Missy. And she would take a deep breath and sigh. And then she would look off into the ethers with this glassy look, and you'd see her tummy squeeze in, and you could see the little lumps of the little kitties, and eventually one came out. So totally on instinct, without the slightest bit of anything to fear, because cats don't go to the cat grocery store and have total strangers pat them on their cat tummies and tell them how bad kitten birth is going to be. Totally on instinct, without an ounce of fear, I watched her give birth to these little kitties. She knew on instinct to go down and break the amniotic sac with her rough tongue, and then lick the baby all over its face to put her scent on it. And then the baby would move off toward a nipple, which is how I treat breastfeeding too. You don't have to have all these crazy positions and all these rules about breastfeeding. You just put the baby near the nipple, and it'll open its mouth and it will latch perfectly. So, and then she'd give birth to another kitty. And I just watched this process, and I was probably 7 years old at this point. And though I didn't have the spirituality of the universe figured out yet, I knew it was the holiest, most sacred thing I'd ever seen, was this cat give birth to kittens. Now
And
there's
it's so
go ahead.
sad, that nowadays this simplicity, just leaving the woman alone, let her figure it out, is like so rare. It's so sad.
Right, right. So after I had that experience in second grade, long before there was a movie where a woman in the movie says, this is from Harry Met Sally, if you haven't seen it, you see it. You know where this phrase comes from. I'll have what she's having. That's the phrase. I'll have what she's having. And I said to myself, someday I'm going to do that. And I'm in second grade. So now, you're growing up, you go through the things where you need to find out about the birds and the bees. And my mother did it. Well, she did the job that she did. And then I got into my teens and I graduated in 1967. So the birth control pill was not available till 1960. And the term natural childbirth, which is not a term I use for what I do, started to be being talked about. And I said, well, if it came close to the definition of what my cat did, someday I'll have what she's having. And I did when it was my time. And all my friends, we all read Thank You, Dr. Lamaze. And I also read a book that was by Marjorie Carmel. And then I read a book called Joy of Natural Childbirth by Helen Russell. And both of those books, when I got pregnant in 1975, told me my body works, just get out of the way and let it.
See?
So
yeah, and that's exactly when I was pregnant, and you remember, you saw me. I knew I wanted to take a childbirth class, but I was not afraid. I was kind of naive in hindsight, because all I knew from my mom, my grandmother, and a couple of friends, not many friends had kids yet, but they gave birth without intervention. It wasn't like a scary event. So when
it was Germany too, so there were different protocols and probably a lot of midwifery practice, and not necessarily midwives were practicing under the thumb of doctors. But so when it came time to have that baby, my friends and I all read Thank You, Dr. Lamaze, which said, and in those two books that I read, it also said, find a fully certified instructor. Don't go to the hospital class that's free by your house. And I was 2 blocks away from St. Joseph's Hospital in Orange, and the class was free, and it was 2 nights. And it told the dads where to get the elevator to the cafeteria, so if they got hungry when she was in labor, and where to go to smoke, because people were smoking back then. But I couldn't believe it. And my friends had horrifying births. But the old philosophy, as long as the baby's healthy and the mother's healthy, and you forget the pain. I don't ever want to forget one exquisite moment of any of my labors or births, because I was so empowered. And what I did is I had to find a real Lamaze class, a fully certified instructor. I had to call New York, and the phone calls weren't free. And then I found a number in Los Angeles, and I got a number for a teacher in Long Beach. And I went, and we paid money and sat on the floor. We have the cushy auditorium like St. Joseph's. And we walked in on May 5th, 1976. And the nurses kept saying, what is this? Where did you learn this? What is this? My husband kept shushing them. It was real Lamaze. The Lamaze that came out of France in the 50s by way of Russia, that got to the United States in the 1960s. Birth control pill, sexual revolution, natural childbirth. Lamaze is never identified as that term. But anyway, that's how I got here. And I held my baby in my arms that night, and I knew a couple of things. One is, if I can do this, I can do anything. Number 2, my mother doesn't know anything about what makes me tick, but I do. I met my authentic self. And then number 3, I could have changed careers. I was already teaching at a college level for Santa Ana College, and I went to UC Irvine, and I did all the stuff that it took to become certified, and started my first classes through the Santa Ana College system.
So then you started teaching Lamaze classes.
Yes.
But at the same time, you were still a high school teacher, right?
No. That didn't overlap. When I had my baby, I'd done 3 years of teaching high school English. That's my major. And then I was teaching for Santa Ana College. I was teaching English as a second language. For the Vietnamese refugees when Vietnam fell. And it was just a fabulous experience. So I was already in the college system. So I started my first Lamaze classes through that. And then in 1988, I taught about 12,000 couples through them and privately, and moved to Hawaii in 1988. After I moved to Hawaii, I became a high school teacher for a pregnant teen program. And I taught summer school teen health and sex ed for years and years. And then I worked at a bunch of hospitals in Hawaii. Yeah. So my high school, I did go back to teaching high school, but this time it was a pregnant teen program and teen health summer school classes.
Yeah, and the passion behind your teaching, I mean, I will never forget. There's probably a handful of women that have impacted my life, and you are definitely one of them. I will never forget walking into that room. I couldn't take my eyes off you, like listening every word. There was so much behind it. I couldn't wait for the next session to start and go back and get more information. It's like, I can see why when you read reviews that women or couples leave. I mean, I can totally feel it all because there was so much passion and you really wanted to get the message across and you got the message across. I mean, we were texting, you were teaching me from Hawaii when I had already moved to California for my second baby, like so much passion. It's like, yeah, how many couples did you teach over the years? Do you know?
Oh, sorry. Okay. Sorry. I'm so sorry about that. I have the way, because I have registration cards for everybody. I have taught about 11,000 couples.
Oh, wow.
How to birth and breastfeed gently. And I love that you brought up the word passion because I taught in almost all the hospitals on the island of Oahu, but one in particular where I did most of my work in the same town where I taught pregnant teen program. And the boss would come to me and say, I really appreciate your passion, but, and when you say but, you have now erased what you've just said.
Right.
Because the longer I taught, the more that the medical philosophy of compliant patient who asks no questions became prominent. So, you know, I like to say for much of my career, I have been in what John Lewis, the famous congressman, said, I've been in good trouble. I was always in trouble. I was always in trouble because I was telling the truth. And when I moved back to California in 2014, my husband and I moved back here to retire. We're in his childhood home. I don't think I'm ever going to retire. I mean, there are too many people that I want to be around because I learn from my students so much too, and my students keep me young. But you know, I now here I've worked for 2 hospitals since I've been back. One recruited me before I even was on, you know, had a California driver's license before I left Hawaii. And it was a very, 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 very large hospital conglomerate. And the boss told me they had no convenience inductions, no unnecessary cesareans, and the staff highly followed people's wishes on their birth plans. And it was all a lie. She was just desperate for a teacher.
So yes, Janis, I want to dig deeper into that. So tell us what you are so passionate about and why you got in trouble, and tell us how you teach the breastfeeding, what you teach the couples, because it's so impactful.
Well, first of all, and I didn't really learn this till I was in training to become a Lamaze teacher. We have rights as patients. Now, we haven't always had rights. I mean, I was born in 1949, and the Equal Rights Amendment, the reason I decided to be a public school teacher was the only job I could go into with equal pay for equal work. But there was a book called The Rights of Pregnant People that I read during my training, and I thought, oh my God. So when I went to my doctors in my first pregnancy and said, I don't want to lie on my back, I don't want to have my arms tied down, and the condescending answers that I got, it was like, then I got fired up because I knew that there were places you could go to read what your rights are. And every hospital has a patient bill of rights. And if you're going to a hospital, call them or ask your doctor to provide you with a copy of your particular birthplace's patient bill of rights. And they will, you know, if you call the hospital, say, oh, you don't have to worry about that. They'll give it to you when you get here. And you say, no, I want it now, because you're in labor when you get there. You're not reading, you know. And then there's also something called, and then eventually there became something called the Speak Up campaign by the Joint Commission. The Joint Commission is the entity in the United States that accredits hospitals, visits them and checks if they're following the rules, fines them, puts them on probation, can close their doors, etc. And the Patient Bill of Rights, the Joint Commission's Speak Up campaign, you can Google it, tells you you have a right to respect, to be listened to have a say-so in your care. And those things that are inherent rights for a patient are not practiced in mainstream American obstetrical care. Okay.
Which
So
is,
go
yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, because I learned from you in your class, we had a birth plan, we had everything written out. We talked it through with the OBGYN, but in the end, when I was on that table getting ready for that cesarean that I wasn't planning on having, but I ended up having a cesarean, they started tying my hands down. And I feel like almost 13 years later, I'm still traumatized by it. So immediately I spoke up and they took the whatever, not, what do you call these things?
They're Velcro straps.
The straps, they took them off, but the damage had been done. Because, but it shows you how the nurses walk in. This is just procedure. This is what they do. No one looked at my birth plan. They just walked in.
Oh, yeah. Well, because they've got you over the barrel. That is why when you take a class from a certified instructor, and honestly, I have to recommend dinosaur instructors that are at least 40 years old, because training programs to certified childbirth educators today is a Friday night, all day Saturday, Sunday morning, read books, study for a test now, and if you pass it, you're a childbirth educator. I was in a program for 2 years through UC Irvine, 6 or 7 months in class every week, much reading to do, teach backs, student teaching, writing a syllabus, and it took me 2 years to get the final full certification. And so it's all about money. So the reason I would say go to a childbirth educator that's got some experience, and I am planning, I've got the outline right here, is to do a course in one of the community colleges around here for people who would like to work in the childbearing field, whether that is then go on to be a doula, go on to take a childbirth certification. But because some of these trainings are so sparse, move them in, charge them a big chunk of money, move them out, hang up the shingle. There's just tons of really, really poor information. And I approached my doctor with my first baby and I said, I don't want to have my arms tied down. And very condescendingly, he said, well, they're just little wristlets like ski poles. I said, I don't want ski pole wristlets around my arms. And then he said to me, well, you especially will be completely out of control because you're planning to do it without drugs. And I said, why would I be out of control when I'm pushing my baby out? And now I say to him, the big thing, because pushing is the part that feels good. And he looked at me, and for anybody listening to this podcast, there are at least 7 physiologic reasons. 6 is available to every woman. 7, because if you take a class from me, I raise your pain tolerance level. I show you how you can raise your pain tolerance level. So if you have a pain tolerance level that's now higher than the rafters of Home Depot, and you start having birth sensations, it takes a long time before you're even saying, oh, these are starting to get strong, because you literally change your pain tolerance level. So this doctor says, and he put his hands up like this, he said, and you will reach my sterile gloved hands, which meant the birth was about him. And I want to tell anybody listening, no woman, or let me be politically correct, no person with the capacity to be pregnant has ever reached for the sterile gloved hands of an obstetrician. We reach for our babies. And that was beyond him. Luckily, his partner was there when I delivered, and he was a lot younger. And, I'm sure he didn't believe that I would be smiling and conversational as I pushed my baby out, because the nurses were blown away. Well, where did you learn this? And they say, well, we have Lamaze. And I said, no, you don't. This is Lamaze. So
Mm.
sadly, years and years ago, the members of the Lamaze organization said, never use our name Lamaze in the title because it'll become a household word. And so people say Lamaze this, Lamaze this. I'm capital Lamaze, not lowercase Lamaze. And anyone who uses the term Lamaze needs to be a certified Lamaze instructor, which I am. So, the passion is that, of course, I'm a child of the 60s. I'm I was horrified at my mother's opinion, my mother's generation, and how they just, men told them what to do, and all of that. And because my generation was the generation of questioning authority and the sexual revolution, and if it feels good, do it, make love, not war, and so we were questioning authority. So in between babies, because I have 3 of them, I went to a new hospital in Orange County. I left St. Joseph's and I went to another hospital that's changed names over the years, but they built it from the ground up, and they asked women what they wanted when they gave birth in this hospital. And so I went over there, and I had this young, Jewish hippie doctor that I'm still friends with, and he wanted to know what his patients wanted for birth.
Mm.
But he's retired now, and
That's how it should be. Yeah.
it's how it should be. But it's become totally about controlling money.
And I think the problem is that by now, a lot of women are so scared because they've heard all these horror stories. I talk to my 9-year-old, and sometimes her friends are around. Like, I told many people it didn't hurt to push the baby out because I did have a VBAC, a vaginal birth, after cesarean with my second. But I mean, even sometimes young girls are so terrified of the whole idea of having a baby, pushing a baby out of their vagina. I'm like, oh, that is.
Let me give the first 3 reasons why pushing feels good for most women, because I tell my students, and I also get a lot of nursing students to take my classes, and I say, go back to your professor and ask her to list 3 of the 7 reasons why pushing feels good. And anybody in medicine will say, well, it's like you're finally doing something, you're not having to be passive. And that is not the answer. This is, I'm gonna give you the first 3. Anybody that wants to know the other 4, they can come and take my class. Number 1, the vagina is made like an accordion. It's structured to stretch. Number 2, you have the hormone relaxin that is in massive and more massive and more massive doses, especially in labor, and it makes so your already stretchy accordion wall vagina makes it even stretchier. And here's the killer: when I was 15 and I started using tampons, the instructions in the Tampax box said that the reason you can't feel a tampon is because the back 3/4 of the vagina is void of nerve endings. They don't say that anymore, because I'm going to have to call the director of education for Tampax International or something, because they say because the muscles at the front hold it in. That does not talk about the fact that 3/4 of the vagina is void of nerve ending. So those are, people learn that on the first lesson with me, which is like, that was worth the money you spent for the whole class just to hear that. When women understand their bodies, then we can honor them.
Yes.
But the truth about women's bodies, first of all, is not taught in medical or nursing school in obstetrics. And so, I mean, because I've had lots of doctors and nurses, and I remember this one doctor who followed me out during the break. It was a lady pediatrician. She goes, Janis, you just taught us pushing, and now I know all the 7 reasons why pushing feels good. Why don't they teach us this in medical school? Why do they teach us to make women lie on their back so they have to push the babies out of the pill? I said, honey, you're going to have to ask your medical school professors. And people have said, what, do you ever go and give these lectures to the residents? I said, nobody's asked me.
I mean, that can only be because it's easier for the doctor, right? That's why they put you on the back. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to put you on the back and have you push your baby up and out.
Well, I did teach that lesson just the other night, and it actually, the lithotomy position for birth was started in the late 1600s, 1700s in France, when there was a French obstetrician who got rid of all the midwives and started having women birth on their backs. And then King Louis the 16th got wind of it and had his court physician deliver his mistresses and wives' babies so he could peek through a curtain. So the lithotomy position for birth started as a male sexual perversion. And then it became a habit.
Oh my God.
And I don't want you to reach my sterile gloved hands. I don't want to birth on my back. Well, that's how the table is. Then things happened like the hospital in Santa Ana that from the ground up said, now it's not like that anymore, because it's changed hands and all of that. But and then I show a movie in my class that was made in a small hospital in Florida where a lot of the Lamaze teachers, certified Lamaze teachers, also nurses on the floor, and the doctors were young and hip. And they asked the women, how do you want to do this? And they, for the first time, they were walking the halls. We got freedom of movement. If we were low risk, we didn't have to have continuous fetal monitoring and IVs. But, the mentality is, and I remember one of my students was told this, the doctor said, well, if all the technology's there, wouldn't you want to use it? And the truth is, the reason America is so low on the scale of maternal and infant morbidity and mortality, means injury or death, is because intervention begets intervention begets intervention begets intervention. If you could avoid the first intervention, just on the phone this morning with a lady. I said, well, they're just reading you the script that I told you about in class, 36 weeks. They said, well, it's 40 weeks. We can start talking about your induction day. And the woman was very upset this morning. So I walked her through it again. I said, remember, I told you it's exactly what they're going to say to every woman the minute she turns 40 weeks. They're going to start saying things like, well, after 41 weeks, the stillbirth rate doubles from 1 to 2 and 2 10,000. That's the doubling of the stillbirth rate. But you hear that, oh my God, if I go 1 minute after 41 weeks, and now the stillbirth rate doubles, and that doesn't qualify whether it's someone with prenatal care or not prenatal care. It's just this fear thing so they can control.
Right. And I can completely confirm, because remember, for me, my water broke, but my labor didn't start for a long time. And I still blame the first intervention on ending up with the C-section.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because everyone started being really impatient.
They were impatient. Right.
So one thing that just pops into my head that I remember you said in class, and I feel like we have to share it here. I said it in a mom's group one time, and some of them were really cool and kind of interested, and some were shocked. But they were talking about, wanting to get the baby out to avoid the interventions. And I said, what Janis taught us is what gets the baby in, gets the baby out. So you need to have sex and you need to have an orgasm to get labor started. And they looked at me like crazy. But
oh yeah, we say that. Well, when Michel Odent, the famous water birth father of modern water birth, he says the energy gets the baby in, gets the baby out. It's oxytocin. It's oxytocin, which happens in orgasm, uterine contractions, and milk letdown. And then the whole other world of how I teach breastfeeding, which is called instinct breastfeeding, which is not the American method. American method breastfeeding, and there's a reason why this happened. Since the 60s, because we missed 15 years without breastfeeding, we came back to it wrong. And so we breastfeed so wrong in America that we've had to create this whole new vocation called a breastfeeding specialist. And I got those credentials behind my name. When I took the training to get those credentials, I finally said on the 4th day to these nurses teaching, I said, but the way you were advising us to handle women with breastfeeding completely negates the baby's instincts. And this nurse said to me, oh, Janis, when we teach it this way, they don't have to use their instincts. And I wish I had said to this lady that was teaching this training class, because it's perfect. I wish I'd said to her, do you remember your first kiss? Anya, do you remember your first kiss?
I do.
And I remember my first kiss too. Would that kiss have been better if his mother and your mother were moving your lips together to make sure that when your lips got together, they would be perfect? No, because kissing is driven by oxytocin. And you can fumble around a little bit with it, but pretty quick you get a hang of it. And in that training that I took, I kept raising my hands right from the first hour. I'd ask a question and the nurses go, I don't know. No one's ever asked that question before. So then during the breaks and the lunches, the young women would come in and say, you sound like you know what you're talking about. I said, I do. And they said, well, why are you taking this class? I said, I'm taking it. I'm paying the money to get the credentials. Now, granted, I did learn some very clinical things for, out in left field situations that can happen with breastfeeding. And that was helpful. But in terms of me helping a mom and a baby, all you need to do is 3 solid weeks of breastfeeding the way I will teach you. And you can pick up that baby and a tiny diaper bag, and you can get on the plane and you can go to Timbuktu and you'll have the quiet baby on the plane. But you got to take the first 3 weeks and I will teach you exactly how to do that. So, I have a website, I have classes. I'm, you go to the website. I'm kind of between webmasters, so I've kind of got a temporary one up, but it tells you the dates and, and I do it on Zoom. And
Perfect.
you know what? I have no boundaries when it comes to that. And the other thing is that all pregnant women have a lowered immune system. And here's why. It's just like if you had a heart, lung, kidney transplant, they would put you on drugs to suppress your immune system so you don't reject the transplanted organ. Your baby is like a transplanted organ. So you automatically have a lower immune system. So the days of in-person classes will not be over because hospital, people are going to do it. But I am supporting the fact that we need to stay healthy. And of course, people say, well, some people think COVID is over. I just got it 3 months ago. So finally, after 3 years of avoiding it, but a pregnant woman has a lowered immune system. So I will finish my career, which I don't see it coming close to. I mean, I'm 74 years old, Anya, and I got to train some more women to get this passion because it's in there.
Yeah.
You just live in America where women are told we don't count at all. I'm not going to go into the details, but if you have noticed, this is not a country that honors the journey of the female. So I asked my mother, where did the baby? I found her under a rock. I want to say, no, you didn't. I want to know exactly. But I didn't have the words for that. And so my journey to find out what it means to be a woman, and I'm still learning, because every era of a woman's life is magic. So when I taught pregnant teens, I had a lot of disasters, but I had some fabulous girls that let teen pregnancy be a stepping stone, not a stumbling block. And then the minute a woman turns 35, they start labeling her a geriatric pregnancy. That's just because men don't understand that women. Jesus Christ's mother was 14 when she had Jesus. She did a really good job. And so I believe, and I treated my pregnant teens with lots of respect. I said, don't let's go to the point and have the doctor talk to your mother. The doctor talks to you. And because every era of a woman's life brings different gifts. So for doctors to decide, and they used to call us if we were 30 and hadn't had a baby, and when I was first having babies in the 70s, elderly primates from primipara, first being pregnant with the Latin, and then they had to move it because so many women were delaying pregnancy because we have choices now. What happens to my body? Then now it was 35, and they called that advanced maternal age. And then now, if you're 40, then they have to keep moving it by 5 increments because women are every era we have, gifts to give our child, and now it's called a geriatric pregnancy. But I counter that with a favorite phrase of mine in the development of the embryo. For a while, the genitals are called the indifferent penis. Of course, it is named after the penis until it, goes whichever way. So I'll get them with indifferent penis. You call me a geriatric pregnancy. So, and I tell that to my mom. Well, they're telling me that my age. So I said, your age, God gave us periods from 12 to 52 because God trusts us in her wisdom to bring the gift of motherhood.
So good. See, we need you to keep sharing all that information and reach as many women as possible. One more thing I want to ask you. So you are writing a book. You just told me before we started recording. Okay, so quickly tell us about the books.
Well, I have a book that I'm writing called The Accidental Lamaze Teacher. because how I became, like I have a baby and suddenly I'm probably calling from the recovery room, I need to enroll in your program. I didn't see from, 4.5 that I was headed in this direction, but that I was the right place at the right time teaching adult education. And I much prefer high school and adult education to junior high school, because high school kids and especially adults come to class because they want to, unlike junior high school students,
Right.
bother to show up. And then I'm going to write, my dad says doula book, and I don't want any of you doulas to get upset, because it's called Dads and Other Cool People as Doula. There is a belief, and it's mainly among the nurse educators, that men cannot step up to the plate and do this. And I've been fighting it since the beginning of my teaching. There are all sorts of things the Lamaze organization did. Well, maybe then the men will engage more. And I say, you have trouble getting the men to engage? Because I don't. And I ran with a bunch of really cool childbirth educators in Orange County, and we didn't have trouble engaging the men. And most classes, they said, well, be encouraging, tell her good job. And that is not, I teach my students to birth in communion with their birth partners. And I don't care who your birth partner is. I've got every combination. They're so colorful and wonderful because we all have so many gifts for our children. So I'm going to write a book called Dads and Other Cool People as Doula that goes with the workbook for my class, that if you didn't take my class online, they will all be coordinated. And I have a daily reflections kind of book that's nothing but empowerment about pregnancy. I mean, there's some, the chicken soup for those books. There's one for pregnancy, and every story is a horror story. Chicken soup for the soul, about being pregnant and being in labor. And it is nothing but cover to cover.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. And then the daily reflections. Oh, and the sex ed book. I'm writing a sex ed book.
Oh my God. I'm going to help you. We talked about it. I'm going to be translating your books.
Oh yeah, you're going to translate it in German.
Yeah.
I have a friend who does it in French.
There's so much work to do.
In Spanish. We do.
Yeah.
And that is the phrase that I use with my daughter, who's a doula in Arizona. You know her. And I say, Katie, there's much work still to be done.
Oh yeah.
And I guess I'm going to have to wait till you and my kids are pulling me off the stage with a vaudeville hook, because as long as this passion is like this, and it doesn't go away. It's like this is other people call it the Janis show. This is the message I want to give to women, that we are fabulous.
I've seen your show, and I loved walking into your class, and you said every single time, okay, we got to get started, because the class is 3 hours, but I have information for 5 hours to get into 3 hours. And there was so much information. So yeah. I'm going to link your website to the show notes so people can reach out to you and see what you have to offer and how they can work with you, because it's definitely
fabulous. I keep my online classes to 9 or fewer couples, because if you get more than that, I cannot give the personal attention. And my class is now a 9-event course. It's 6 3-hour in-person Zoom, another Lamaze lesson, but it's not interactive, so it's on a tape. And then there's you'd love this, Anya. It's an hour and 15-minute labor and birth rehearsal. And I pose little situations, and then you think, oh, what should we do? And I say, oh, if you decided to do this, then you're on track. If you did this, and it's really fun. And then what I do is I do a one-on-one Zoom meeting with each couple, prior to their due date, to do all of their last minute questions. And this structure has evolved because of COVID. So, that's happened, because I think I'm giving my students a more personal course, because there was another hospital I worked for in Orange County, and I was having 25 couples in it. I can't do any personal attention. And that's not me. I'm going to tell you the truth. Oh, and the first hospital I talked about working in since I came back to California, I had to quit. And I said, I have to quit because you want me to teach a curriculum. It's a lie. And they didn't know what to do with me.
Good for you, but that's good.
Yeah. And then the other one fired me in October because I was telling the truth about childbirth, and the doctors didn't want it. We don't want them to know this stuff. To be forbidden to teach breastfeeding, but you cannot use the term infant's instincts and you teach breastfeeding. I said, well, then I can't teach breastfeeding.
Yeah, that doesn't go together.
Yeah. So there's a Janis show, Anya. I know you've heard it, but
yeah,
Janis goes on.
Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing all this. I'm sure many, many, many women are going to be so excited to have that information. And again, I'm going to post your website and everything.
And if
So
they're interested in a course, it'll probably be a 12-week course. It'll be on Zoom. They're going to do it at the community college because you would like to go into the field of helping women in pregnancy, whether it's a volunteer doula or go on. There's something called a latch doula that I'm going to train women for, just to be there when the birth is, to hold the people back. So no one's talking to the mother, no one's touching the mother or the baby, and have a just, and I'm working on that thing. So lots of ways to work like you are. I mean, you're finding your niche to make sure that women count.
yeah. Thank you so much, Janis.
Thank
Awesome
you
work
guys.
you.